again, everybody. The Fishbeck Learning Exchange is back from our summer hiatus, and we hope your summer has been warm and wonderful too. Welcome. We're glad you're spending some time with us today. So, if you think traffic engineering is just red lights and roundabouts, think again. Kyle Reidsma joins us to reveal the surprising ways traffic impacts everything, from campus safety to community development. Kyle is a vice president, senior traffic engineer, and project manager in our Transportation Michigan department. And while we were kids reenacting movie chase scenes with our Matchbox cars, Kyle was figuring out the most safe and efficient way to move those cars across the floor. I jest, of course, but Kyle is here to help us unpack what traffic engineering really involves, why it's more than just roads and signals, and how bringing this discipline in early can transform projects and communities alike. So let's hit the road. Kyle, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So let's start. I like to do this all the time. Let's start at the beginning because I want people to know more about who the guy is with this cool, I guess we'll call it a goatee. Okay, an engineer with that impressive goatee. Let's start at the beginning. Okay. What first sparked your interest in traffic engineering? Was there something that the light came on for you, or like how did it start?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to get into civil engineering and ended up taking a course in college on traffic and transportation engineering. Really liked it. It was just unique and very applicable to everyday life. So I got an internship doing it and started full time after I graduated.
Where did you do? You didn't do your internship here?
I did not.
Okay.
Nope.
Too bad, because that would have been a great story.
Nope.
Oh, man. So you said you knew you wanted to be a civil engineer.
Yeah.
But then traffic engineering piqued your interest. And I think when most people, maybe not most engineering minds, but when other people hear traffic engineer, their first thought's going to be what I referenced, traffic signals, roundabouts, things like that, road designs. But what is something surprising maybe about this career, something that's unexpected that you regularly deal with in your work?
Well, I'd say the first thing that came to mind is everyone is a traffic engineer in their mind, right?
Okay, that's a good point.
I mean, do you use
I'm
the
an
roads?
expert.
Do you use your bike? Do you walk, right? So you have an opinion. You think you know what might work best, right? So
right.
I think we deal with that a lot, that everyone does think they know a little bit about traffic engineering or enough.
Guilty.
But I think, it's not just, like you said, the red lights and the roundabouts. It's how do we impact safety? How do we impact operations? It's balancing kind of those two things, mobility and safety.
I laugh when you say impact because I said it in the intro where I said traffic impacts, and we probably don't want to say impact when we're talking about traffic, but it's fine. It's a little joke. So personally, so you got into it, you liked it, but I'm sure that, you've been in the career. How long have you been doing this? Long time.
24 years. Yeah.
So a good amount of time.
Yeah, enough.
So what is the why? What keeps you coming back?
Yeah, for me, it's giving back to, improve safety. How did you get to work today?
I did drive.
Okay, and you made it here.
Skin of my teeth.
Okay, so something went right.
Yeah.
I think about, I have three daughters, right? And two of them are driving, and the other one school age. So it's like, how does this impact everyone's life, right? You got school drop off, you got college and universities where there's students on campus walking, biking, transit. People can't get anywhere without having to deal with traffic. And so whether we're looking at safety of pedestrians, of bicyclists, or just pushing people through work zones, how do we do that safely? And so I think for me, it's looking at things from that perspective of, how I can impact communities and make things better and safer for everyone.
Yeah. It's funny because coming to work today, you mentioned it. I had to detour, and I'm like, I was kind of annoyed. I'll admit it. But when the detour I was planning on taking, there was like a flag crew.
Yep.
And it was today, so you were front and center. I knew we had this exchange coming up, so I'm like, I'm not going to be annoyed. I'm just going to be patient. These guys are working, and they weren't the engineers, but it's like that's all planned.
Yes.
Most of the time. So I get it. Okay, and in that answer, you sort of referenced a lot more than just road freeway design. You talked about universities, you talked about other things. So it's clearly more than just keeping traffic moving on the highway. Can you walk us through then the range of, like some of the ranges of projects or things like that you and your team work on?
Yeah, there's
traditional, non-traditional, whatever.
There's a lot of different things we get our hands in. On the design side, it's like you said, traffic signals, right? So we got to design those things that people don't think about. Anything that controls traffic. So the paint on the roadway. There's certain guidelines that have to be followed so that people expect things, going from city to city, state to state, that there's standards for that. Signs as well. So we design all of that. And then as far as constructing a project, right, you have to build a road project or a bridge project. So how do we maintain traffic during that? Where do we put cars? Not just a detour, but do we have to shift everybody to one side of the road so that we can safely have workers on the other side of the road? And so there's thought and design that goes into all of that. On the other side, we do studies. So we can look at operations, what impacts those might have on, like, let's say a new development going in, right? Like something's going to get built. What impact is that going to have on the surrounding neighborhood, the surrounding intersections? So we look at projecting traffic and see what that does. And if you need extra lanes, do you need to change signal timings? Those sort of things. Crash analysis, looking at historical data of what's going on to know, are there improvements that can be made? Are there certain areas where incidents keep occurring? So what can we do to fix that? School studies, looking at how to improve pickup drop off.
Yeah. Big one.
Exactly. I deal with it myself, and I know every time I do it, I think I have to like turn it off in my head because I'm like, this should get fixed, that should get fixed. But everyone's trying to do the best they can there because we've got think about the safety of the students, but also the parents who are probably not as patient at that point in time.
Right.
So, but yeah, so we look at safety, we look at operations, and on the planning side too for all users. You
referenced higher education. Mm-hmm. So my mind doesn't go there automatically when I hear traffic engineer, but there's, like you said, there's pedestrians, there's cars moving around there. So what kind of challenges, opportunities kind of spring up in a higher education or an education environment like that?
Again, it's getting people to and from the places they need to be. So on a campus, it might be getting people to and from a parking lot or a parking deck safely, getting traffic through there, but also the consideration of, this is a college campus. So there's lots of visitors. There's lots of students who may or may not be the best drivers. And then a lot more peds and bikes than you would normally see.
Right. So rollerbladers probably.
Yeah, exactly. Scooters. Yep. And so sometimes when you go into an environment like that, you have to kind of flip the thought process in terms of what you're trying to design for or look at, because your users are more vulnerable. They're pedestrians, bicyclists, scooters. And so trying to prioritize who is more important in that regard, right? So how do we treat them versus treating the vehicular traffic?
Yeah, and there's especially in big, larger colleges or universities that have like a big draw sporting event, you have huge fluctuations in the numbers of people on campus as well, which I'm sure anyone who's been to a Spartan football game or something like that has experienced.
Yep.
Is that, how do you design, how do you take that into account?
Yeah, for something like that where it's a large scale event, typically we're designing for a typical day or a standard day. Now, with large scale events like that, we work with the campus, their emergent or their public service, public safety folks, to try and develop what those plans might look like for ingress and egress on those events, because you don't want to bring people all the way to it, right? Because that's where everyone's walking around.
Right.
So you don't want to bring cars into that mix. And so it's just working with the university on trying to figure out what that plan might look like for special events.
Yeah. And then, do students cross where they're supposed to?
Does anybody?
No, I mean, I don't, unless there's like clearly marked paint, right? Then
Yeah.
I'll know.
So it's trying to find that balance though of where it makes the most sense and where students, sometimes they're going to dictate where we should put a crossing, right? Because you're going to see what the students are all doing, and then, okay, well, should we reevaluate this? And maybe this is where the crossing should go instead.
You mentioned too, this is just sparked my curiosity. So just bear with me on this. You mentioned earlier on, traffic signal design.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that also include like the timing of the lights, or is that just like the way?
It's both. We get into both. Yep.
Okay.
So it's the timings to get traffic through there, give the proper clearance intervals to get people through safely, make sure there's walk time for the pedestrians, and what do you need a left turn phase, like left turn arrows?
I do think it's helpful to see the countdown.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
But there is always that, like, is this a signal that it's going to go yellow when the countdown gets to 3? Or is it going to go yellow when it gets to like 0? Because I'm always like, which one is it?
Yep.
I try to time my approach speed.
Yep.
I should be good and just start braking, right? But I think people want to know. Do you have control over that?
Yeah, that goes into some of the stuff that we're studying. Yeah.
So submit your preferences to Kyle.
And I will say in that specific comment you made, it really is up to each municipality on when they end that. So that does present some confusion sometimes.
Okay. Don't really send that to Kyle. He's going to get mad at me for that. Sorry about that. All right. Now, you talked a second ago about development, and this is really the surprising parts is like, if there's a development, you don't necessarily think traffic right away. But how, when there's a large commercial or residential project, or even like a high impact one like a Chick-fil-A around here, big deals.
Yep.
When there's something like that going up, what are some of the traffic considerations that people don't necessarily keep front of mind or consider right away? They think about it maybe later, but what are some of the impacts?
Yeah, so obviously with something large scale, really any development's going to have a impact, right? Because you're going to bring traffic to and from it. But the larger scale ones are where you're going to have a larger impact. So it's, what sort of infrastructure changes might be needed based on that amount of traffic. So we know what baseline traffic is out there today, but if you put in that Chick-fil-A or whatever large residential, what's that going to then draw to and add to an already maybe congested network? And so we'll look at that and what those impacts might be, because if you're the developer or if you're the municipality, you want to hold the developer to, putting in the proper infrastructure so that their site can function properly.
Yeah.
If you're the developer, you want to get people in and out safely and efficiently. So there might be changes you need to make. And so on our end, it's, we got to do data collection to figure out what's out there today. And then from there, we kind of project what it might be and study it from that perspective. So it just takes a little bit of time to collect that data on the front end and then run the analysis.
All of that downstream effect, like butterfly effect from a huge development, or even just an extra driveway entering, yeah, it's really neat.
So depending on the size, right, our study area might be just a single intersection, or it might be a whole corridor, because it just really depends on the size of the development and where traffic might be coming to or from.
Right. Good. Another interesting thing was the environmental side of this too. Like, when you're putting all that asphalt down, or gosh, I'm using the wrong terms. There I go.
You're good.
You're putting all that cement or whatever down. There's going to be runoff. There's lots of those sorts of things. So how do traffic engineers affect that? How do they mitigate it? How do they work with environmental concerns to make it good, positive?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with environmental concerns in traffic is the air quality. And so how do we improve traffic operations to reduce stoppages, right? If you're sitting there idling, there's a lot of emissions. So there's where your signal timings come into play.
Idle time.
How can we optimize that so people aren't stopping, sitting, and having those emissions that are negative on the environment, right?
Right. Dumping their coffee out.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I see that a lot. Well, that's something you don't think about too,
Yeah.
idle time. I was thinking like drainage,
No,
and
that's
part of it too.
That's
but-
part of it too, but not so much on the traffic side of it.
Yeah. But you intersect with, those are all parts of those projects. So these, maybe large traffic projects as well also invite other disciplines in
Yep.
as part of it too. Yeah. Okay. You've worked as part of, larger projects at Fishbeck, like lots of moving parts, multidisciplinary projects. Why is it valuable to invite traffic engineering into that conversation early on, before there's a road to design or a light to time or anything like that?
Yeah, I think just getting that perspective on safety and operations from a traffic engineering perspective can be helpful, because that can impact what that design might look like, or the layout of a site, building, whatever, how the traffic safety and operations play into it. Having that perspective on it might save time later on if we come in and say, maybe this needs to be changed. If we're involved earlier in the process, we might be able to offer that opinion and save some time later down the road.
Well, and when you think about it too, like you mentioned it, like, how did I get to work? I drove. Everybody is a traffic engineer. Everyone has their ideas. So whenever there's a project that impacts traffic in any way, people are going to be either happy about it or not, let's say.
Yes.
So bringing traffic engineers early helps maybe mitigate those issues. And you're actually, in a way, designing the experience of the public, of maybe the clients and users,
Correct.
So that's far reaching, more so than I would have even thought.
Yep.
So that's cool. I see why you're into it.
It gets into everything, right? Good and bad. I think to all the different departments that we do work with here with our traffic team, and it reaches out to a lot of them, to most of them, because everything does have traffic involvement.
Yeah.
And so we have the opportunity and the pleasure to get to work on a lot of different projects because of that.
What about some more specific projects? Was there any one, or is there any one where you guys were brought in early? Traffic was brought in early, and it made a big difference.
Yeah, I think there's a number of them, and I won't get too specific on them,
right,
but there's some that work, some that don't. But yeah, there's a number of them. If it's thought about early, we're brought into it, and it can help with laying out a site, looking at what these improvements how they might benefit this project, what that looks like, and how that helps. But it's not coming in at the end and trying to, well, did you consider this? Did you consider that?
Yeah.
So we've had that. I mean, we've had success with that with a number of different departments here at Fishbeck.
What's something, because we've talked sort of at length at all the different effects that it can have on kids walking to school or being dropped off, commuters getting through a busy intersection or corridor. So what's something that you wish more that the public understood more about traffic engineering, or maybe even clients, but we'll just say the public? What's something you wish they knew more about it, about the role of traffic engineering in everyday life?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier. We try to balance safety and mobility, right? And you get some people who only want to focus on one side of it, and others who want the other, right? And so, yes, we got to get people there safely, but we also got to get people places. And so we need that mobility side. And I think sometimes people can get hung up on one or the other, but traffic flow is a balance of the two. And so just that's what we're trying to do. We need to get people one place, but we also need to do it safely. And so that might mean there's delays. That might mean, it's not going to go as smoothly as you want, but there's reasons behind that. And so I think it's just understanding that we're thinking this through, and that, there's a give and take we have here.
Yeah. It's not for the faint of heart, is it? I mean, you probably get calls a lot. I don't know. I'm just speculating now, but so thinking about the future, and I had recent conversation when I was away on vacation. My brother had used in another state. He had used like a self-driving Uber,
Mm-hmm.
and this was on the schedule. I won't lie and say I thought about it immediately with this, but after the fact, I thought back about it. I guess that's a thing in some places.
It is.
I don't know that I've seen it here yet, but somewhere maybe. I don't know if it's laws or whatever. But smart cities, self-driving Uber type things, lots of different infrastructure. Thinking about the future, what are some changes coming that you guys have to grapple with or get your heads around?
Yeah, I think, the autonomous vehicle thing, that conversation has been going on for a while and will continue to. I mean, you have some locations where, you can ride in them and it works out great.
I don't know.
I think it's a very long time down the road before, everyone's vehicle is able to do something like that. And so what can we do with the current infrastructure that we have to accommodate that? And so, some of the things we have are technology improvements in the traffic signals. So how can they communicate to each other? How can they communicate to vehicles or to you on your smartphone if you're walking? Sometimes there's technology coming out that'll be sending messages to you, whether it's on your phone or to your vehicle to, red lights coming up or congestion's ahead. I mean, it's similar to what some of those apps are doing, but there's technology out there moving towards that direction.
So I could get like a text message from like the light at 28th Street?
Yeah. I mean,
That's
you
great.
can't, but that's where we're
Yeah.
some of the direction. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's other uses of technology that we're seeing more is like probe data for getting traffic speeds, traffic volumes, using like Bluetooth,
Yeah.
high level probe data, and then using that to estimate what volumes are on certain roadways, what travel times might be, what speeds are. And so there's companies out there that we can get data from that's a little bit easier because, let's be honest, everyone's got a cell phone in their car at all times. And
Pretty much.
if it's turned on, they're able to pull some data from that.
Hands-free.
Hands-free,
You need to say
Drive
that.
safe.
Hands-free, of course. So just another random question.
Yeah.
It just popped in my head, and I'm asking it. If you're ever like going on like a fishing trip, a guy's trip, whatever, do they all default to you to plan like the route? Are they all like, "Oh, Kyle's got this"?
I'm still the guy who just plugs it into my phone.
Good.
And every time I try and outsmart it, it proves me wrong.
Yeah. Technology's
Yep.
great. We're gonna wrap it up here with this. What advice or what thoughts do you have for someone that's curious about getting into traffic engineering? Maybe, and we've had a lot of interns recently, civil engineers that were like, "Hey, hanging out with Kyle occasionally. We went bowling that one night or whatever. He's cool. He's got a really cool job. I want to do more." What kind of advice do you have for folks like that want to get into the field? What kind of skills should they develop or mindsets do they need that's going to make that's essential for them to really prosper, to thrive, to do good work?
Yeah, one thing I always say is just, and this applies to anybody, is just ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Always be curious.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. Don't see that as a weakness. You're going to learn from that. But I think from a traffic engineering perspective, I think, we kind of touched on a lot of different projects that we deal with. Being able to multitask. We have a lot going on at any given time. And so being able to bounce between a lot of different project types, size, clients, who you're working with. So just having that ability to bounce between things. So being adaptable to that. And then I mentioned it, you got to be a little bit thick-skinned.
Yeah.
You hear about it. I have friends who every time they're in a traffic jam or whatever, it's Kyle, it's their inside joke, but
Do
it's
they
true,
call you
right?
and yell?
They do sometimes, but they know that, hey, someone's responsible for this, but we're trying our best.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Don't take offense, but just I'm going to do it.
You can put a face to it, right?
Yeah, it helps. But now I'm not as angry because I like you.
It makes it work.
Yeah,
right?
See, that does work. Maybe people should do that. Personify
Use
their
me,
rage.
right? Yeah,
right?
there you go. Be mad at me.
Okay, great. Well, Kyle, before we finish, is there anything else that you were hoping to say or to cover that in all of our banter, we missed or didn't get involved with? Is there a key point missing that you're going to be like, darn it, that you can think of?
No, I think it's just a reminder, drive safe, through your work zones, everywhere.
Yeah.
There's speed limits for a reason. So just a reminder, you said hands-free. That's a good one too.
Yeah. And call Kyle.
Yes.
Or think about Kyle and his team or the transportation team in your state. If if you have a project that isn't even transportation, related, because what we're learning is that they're all transportation or traffic related in any case.
Yep.
Kyle, thanks again for joining us on the Learning Exchange. This was fun. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for giving us a look behind the curtain on this world of traffic engineering.
Love it.
Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you next time.